Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. T.S. Ravishankar, Director Epigraphy, retired ASI Mysore, on paper Indian Epigraphy module Sanskrit language in Indian Epigraphy. To understand, the main module is made effort to understand how Sanskrit played a unique place as an epigraphical pan-Indian language, and to understand further how Prakrit language all along with Sanskrit also there, and Sanskrit also made its beginning from the end of the 1st century BC and various ramifications. We can put this as the Sanskrit inscriptions pre-Gupta period, and then those inscriptions of post-Gupta, and then further as a third category we can see all along the regional languages how Sanskrit also was a very important medium, epigraphical medium, which many of the dynasties both in north, south and many minor dynasties they followed, and that's how we have large number of lithic and copper plate inscription which runs in several hundreds. And as students of Indian epigraphy, I think the due importance has not been given to Sanskrit all through, and it is very, very essential to study Sanskrit. Without study, we cannot understand the deeper implications of epigraphy. Well, let it be any language, even Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, but a basic knowledge of Sanskrit is absolutely essential to understand the implications, because basically from Sanskrit many originated, many terms we see in many of the Dravidian languages too, and especially when you come to Malayalam, there is heavy presence of Sanskrit words in Malayalam. And a brief knowledge about the format of the all inscriptions is required. An inscription becomes Swasti it begins with an auspicious symbol and normally followed by a imprecatory verse, as a invocatory verse in praise of Shiva, Vishnu, which are normally written in Sanskrit. Whether it is from the earliest period, but in later period we have a large number of inscriptions, lithic and copper plate, which normally begins with invocatory verse and then followed by date and the genealogical history of the king and the operative portion where the donation, grant or any object of the inscription is made. Further, in copper plates we have imprecatory verses also, which is normally written in Sanskrit and ends with Mangalam. So, in the beginning few inscriptions we find, but post-Gupta period we have large number of inscriptions, and in fact in terms of number of inscriptions, perhaps Sanskrit stands first all along with the regional language. Let it be Tamil, let it be Kannada or even other languages, but Sanskrit stood first even among with other languages too. So there is no need to reiterate the fact that Sanskrit as an inscription language enjoyed a unique state as a pan-Indian language. Earlier when we spoke about the Brahmi script, we said it is a pan-Indian script. Now similar is the status of Sanskrit. Like Brahmi, Sanskrit too enjoyed. Unfortunately, earlier records we don't have. Earlier records are in Prakrit, but subsequent phase, by end of 1st century AD, BC onwards, we have a large number of inscriptions, and particularly after post-Gupta period, we have a number of innumerable inscriptions which the rulers, late medieval rulers also continue to write in Sanskrit. So there is a great need to understand Sanskrit as a language, otherwise a proper understanding of Indian epigraphy is not possible. So Sanskrit as an epigraphical made its appearance at the end of the Christian era. So we had earlier seen the Shodasha inscription, which made a paradigm shift as far as the script is concerned. Same is the record which is written in beautiful Sanskrit, which Mathura, Kshatrapas of Mathura wrote, and that's very important. And of course, from Gupta period onwards, we have larger number of inscriptions written in Sanskrit, and Prakrit is slowly replaced. And in northern context, Sanskrit inscriptions came much earlier, whereas in South, Prakrit was replaced in Sanskrit, took place after 4th, 5th century onwards. Among the earliest inscription, mention may be made of Goshundi, Hathibada, Ayodhya. See, I don't know this knowledge of the script and the language was limited in earlier context, and those in Sanskrit inscriptions have a greater bearing on the Brahminical religion, and those mainly belonging to the Jaina and Buddhism are all Prakrit inscriptions. So gradually Brahminical faith, when it emerged and it became this one, and Sanskrit gained its more popularity. So thus in earlier inscriptions, it is amply reflected in Hathibada, Goshundi, and Ayodhya is very good. I had the privilege of personally examining that inscription where it mentions Pushya Mitra. So this is a very important inscription. The earliest inscriptions of Mathura. Mathura has a unique place in different contexts, from the archaeological context, from the sculptural context, and it is a nucleus. It's a main center where we find the emergence of many things. And epigraphical material is not an exception to it. Large number of inscriptions are found, basically Jaina and Brahminical, to some extent Buddhism also. And those inscriptions which have a bearing on Brahminical religion are written in Sanskrit. That's why we have Kshatrapa Shodasha inscription, which is from Mathura and belongs to the 1st century AD. Except the beginning portion, the remaining part of the inscription is written in beautiful Sanskrit, which is really appreciable. Another inscription again from the north is the Mora well inscription. It is also one of the earliest inscription written on a door jamb, and it is written in a standard Sanskrit. And further we have a few inscriptions from Mathura which are written in language, and they all belong to the early phase. Firstly, they are mostly Brahminical affiliation, and those from Kankalitila. So Mathura has many archaeological sites. Excavations yielded large number of inscriptions which are stored in Mathura Museum, and they are of Jaina in nature and Brahminical also, and most of them they are written in beautiful Sanskrit language. Another inscription is Tokritila. It records the donations apparently in Brahminical nature during the reign of Huvishka. Especially the later Kushana period, we have large number of inscriptions. Apart from early phase, we have Prakrit, and later we have many Sanskrit inscriptions emerged during the Kushana phase. A good number of inscriptions are from Mathura. From the early 1st to about the 2nd century AD, they are written fairly in good Sanskrit. So this is a phase where we notice that Sanskrit began to establish itself as an epigraphical language. In this era, especially Brahminical circles continuing to trend, which began in the 1st century BC. So this is a very, very important aspect to note with. So periodization and zonalizations have been made. Now first instance, let us take some early inscriptions from Western India. From Mathura, we can proceed to the western side where we have the Nasik inscription. The Kshatrapas were very famous, and Ushavadata's Sanskrit inscription is very classic example how it is written in beautiful Sanskrit language, which belongs to 1st century AD. So Junagadh rock inscription of Rudradaman. This we have been taking again in many contexts when it comes to Sanskrit inscriptions and when it is as a literary inscription. This is a very, very important, unique landmark, milestone inscription in the epigraphical studies. Of course, with Rudradaman, he could produce one of the best Sanskrit inscription. Unfortunately, his successors didn't bring those inscriptions which are of very great of Sanskrit value. The Junagadh rock inscription, the greatest king of the second Western Kshatrapa line, belonged to Chastana lineage of 150 AD, forms a major paradigm shift as far as usage of Sanskrit is concerned. The Sanskrit of the Junagadh inscription was evidently pre-literary classical style. The literary style of Sanskrit was not, however, employed in the inscription of the time of Western Kshatrapa rulers who subsequently succeeded Rudradaman. Another classification which we normally see is early Sanskrit inscriptions from the Deccan and southern India. Though it is no way lagging, South India and the Deccan also produce large number of Sanskrit inscriptions, of course fairly in a later phase. When we take a general look at the Sanskrit inscriptions from Deccan and southern India, we are given to understand that the Sanskrit inscriptions began to appear slightly at a later date when compared to north. The first significant group of Sanskrit inscriptions is from Nagarjunakonda. Earlier inscriptions we too have written, they are written in Prakrit also, but for the first time, most of the early Sanskrit inscriptions are reported from Nagarjunakonda. In addition to many Prakrit inscriptions, there are many Sanskrit inscriptions too. And then subsequently we have the earliest dated inscription from Nagarjunakonda of the year 11 of the king Yahavala Chantumula, which is a Brahminical record, which and it is written in a classical verse. It's a beautiful inscription, one of the earliest inscriptions from Nagarjunakonda. A Buddhist inscription of Yahavala of 24th regnal year in Sanskrit prose is more or less like the above inscription. Thus, we have Nagarjunakonda examples of both the standard and hybridized Sanskrit in both Buddhist and Brahminical records, and all from a period when Prakrit inscriptions were all still being written. So here we see all along Prakrit inscriptions, even Sanskrit inscriptions were produced. Nagarjunakonda is a very, very classic example for this. Similarity is observed also in north. So earlier we also spoke about the Moravell inscription, and next several of the early inscriptions epigraph from is from Basip copper plate inscriptions of Vakataka. There we have some inscriptions where we have usage of both the Prakrit as well as Sanskrit. So this is a classic inscription, Basim copper plate inscription. In this charter, the introductory genealogical portion is written in Sanskrit, while the remaining operative portion of the grant is in Prakrit. Like that, similar examples are there, and here only one or two is cited. Similar patterns emerge in this period from far south. But there are two records which belong to early Pallava period, Maidavolu and Hirihadagalli. They are exclusively written in Pallava, and only later Pallavas they try to popularize Sanskrit inscription, both in lithic as well as in copper plate inscriptions. So the early Pallava charters from Maidavolu and Hirihadagalli, datable to about 4th century AD, are in Prakrit, but on some of them came names of the kings which are recorded on the seals are written in Sanskrit. The Gunapadeya copper plate of the time of Skandavarman have imprecatory verses at the end. Earlier I was mentioning this is in the last imprecatory verse mostly we find in Sanskrit, and this is perhaps one of the earliest examples where imprecatory verses are found in the end of the record. And progression is seen towards Sanskrit more and more in Mattepad copper plates of Damodarvarman. So a major shift is seen around the later part of the 4th century AD in southern India. Prakrit is totally being replaced by Sanskrit and is also attested in inscriptions of several other dynasties. So here are some more dynasties where we have beautiful Sanskrit inscriptions. A particular clear case appears in two copper plate inscriptions of Salankayana from Kamekollu. Though the early Pallava charters are in Prakrit, first year of Nandivarman's grandson Skandavarman is in Sanskrit, and they are datable to 4th and 5th centuries on paleographical grounds. So from Sanskrit emerges as a sole important language. So we find most of in southern India, all along the regional language, Sanskrit also becomes an important language where Rashtrakutas, Chalukyas and subsequent rulers amply used Sanskrit in their charters and copper plate inscriptions. So Other regions, early Sanskrit inscriptions from other regions, let us examine, and a few examples are cited here. With the exception of early Ayodhya exception as mentioned above, there are few early Sanskrit inscriptions from eastern and northern eastern India. There are some short inscriptions of Magha kings of Kaushambi, which are dated in 2nd century AD in Sanskrit, and Bandhagar inscription of Vaishravana and the Kosam pillar of Vaishravana. The earliest inscription, true Sanskrit inscription from northeast. So normally there are very few inscriptions. From the northeast, very few inscriptions are reported. One such inscription is Susinia, a rock inscription reported from about 4th century AD. It is also written in beautiful Sanskrit. And then again, we have another inscription, a brick inscription reported from Jagatpur. It also belongs to 3rd century AD, and they are also written in beautiful classical Sanskrit language. So now altogether different phases emerge now. You may see we have earlier seen the earlier phase of the Sanskrit inscriptions. Now we are going to further another level where the emergence of Sanskrit in Gupta period, and this proved to be really epoch-making as far as epigraphical studies are concerned. It was during the early Gupta period, we have large number of inscriptions, and totally they are written in Sanskrit inscriptions, and especially the classic example is Samudragupta's Allahabad pillar inscription. As you all students of history, its contents is not only political, it is par with any literary work written in beautiful Champu style, and it is considered one of the best literary example when it is written in Latin. The emergence of Sanskrit in the Gupta period, thus about the end of the 4th century and the 5th century, Sanskrit had established itself virtually as a sole language for epigraphical use throughout India. Prakrit as an epigraphical fell out of use with occasional use for literary. As we have cited earlier, King Bhoja had a penchant for Prakrit language. That's how he could produce some Sanskrit works like Parijata Mandari and all. Otherwise, as inscriptional, it ceased. Practically, Sanskrit continued to enjoy its privileged position in northern India for many centuries until region and Islamic languages began to appear in inscriptions of the medieval period. However, Sanskrit continued to be in usage along with other languages. In South, the regional languages and their appearance are more prominently seen. Thus, a review, as we have seen above, Sanskrit has a well-established language during Gupta Empire. Sanskrit was adopted as the sole administrative language for epigraphic and other purposes. The adoption of Sanskrit by the Guptas is sometimes thought to represent a Brahminical revival, though the resurgence of Sanskrit taken place in full measure during the time of the Guptas. The possibility of Sanskrit as a pan-Indian language right from the early Christian era cannot be precluded. So, mere absence of Sanskrit doesn't mean that it was not there, but only earlier phase we have Prakrit inscription, but Sanskrit inscriptions started slowly emerging at a later phase. Now we are going to take up another important aspect, literary value. Sanskrit inscriptions can be evaluated from the literary point of view. When there are so many large number of inscriptions, it forms a major chunk itself to be studied separately for its literary value. As we all know, apart from being a rich repository of contemporary records, some of the early records are very, very important from the literary point of view. Inscriptions, especially Sanskrit inscription, comprise among sources for the study of Sanskrit literature. Especially some of the inscriptions are endowed with very high literary value. Very few inscriptions are cited here. One such inscription is the Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta, which is written in beautiful Champu style by the poet Harisena. And but for this inscription, we would have lost a beautiful literature written in Champu style. It's very, very important. Now, another very important inscription is Aihole inscription of Pulakeshin II, and this is very important. Apart from the political exploits, it contains a wider range of literary value composed in different meters. It's a very, very important inscription brought from southern India. Again, one of the earliest literary work is of Rudradaman, which I have mentioned above. But when we speak of the literary, this is one of the inscriptions to be reckoned with, which is written in pure verse, and it stands as a beautiful piece of literature belonging to 2nd century AD. Unfortunately, Rudradaman inscription, the poet name is lost, but it's a classic example. Another inscription from the south is the Talagunda inscription of Kakusthavarman. It's very important contribution to Sanskrit literature, and fortunately, name of the poet is preserved. He is the Kubja. It may be noted that majority of the are in meter, which is not met with in other literary works. So it has come to our knowledge that some of the well-known poets, apart from Prashastis, through this, we have come to know the name of the poets which are not otherwise known. Perhaps it is for the first time the Aihole pillar inscription. Through that we have come to know the name of the Kalidasa and Bharavi. Otherwise, in the epigraphical literature, we didn't have any such reference. So it forms a very important chapter. So here also we know one of the name of the poet, Umapati Dara, the author of the Diopara inscription. We know that the poet Jayadeva, through Umapati Dara, he was one of the important points he mentions. The Prashasti is a significant contribution to Sanskrit literature. The occurrence of passages or even complete works in lithic works is illustrated in inscriptions on the pillar of Surya temple at Kanchipuram, like Surya Shataka of Mayura. So, thus we have come to know many names of the poets who are also composers of the great inscriptions. An example is supplied by Paridata Mandari. Earlier I referred when we were speaking about the Prakrit inscription. Here is an example during the time of Bhoja. Parijata Manjari was composed by Madana and discovered at Dhar. Along with this were discovered two other Prakrit poems attributed to King Bhoja, eulogizing the tortoise incarnation of Vishnu, of his great interest as Bhoja himself as a great patron of letters. Thus, the above facts reveal there are several inscriptions, especially Prashastis found in the Indian subcontinent, which are endowed with great literary value and which formed a class by itself. Now let us proceed to concluding the final aspect of our Sanskrit inscriptions, the inscriptions from Southeast Asia and Sanskrit inscriptions. All along our tradition and culture, along with scripts, the languages also traveled, and most of the countries of Southeast Asia are replete with Sanskrit inscriptions, right from early 5th century to later period. And here, all along the tradition and culture, the scripts and languages too traveled outside Indian subcontinent to different adjacent countries, especially to Southeast Asia. There are hundreds of inscriptions written in a script which are akin to Brahmi, which was in vogue in 5th century AD. And many Sanskrit and Prakrit inscriptions dating from 5th to 16th centuries have been found in Thailand, dated paleographically to 5th century. In the 7th to 12th century, Sanskrit inscriptions become quite common. Several of the major Sanskrit inscriptions are found in eastern part of Thailand, belonging to Khmer kings and neighboring Cambodia also. There are hundreds of Sanskrit inscriptions reported from Cambodia. Some of the inscriptions are very long inscriptions, range in date from 5th or 6th century to 13th or 14th centuries. The Sanskrit inscriptions of Cambodia have won praise for their literary and scholarly qualities and skill of their composition and execution. Their style is typically highly ornate, especially in eulogistic portions of royal grants. One of the features of Cambodian Sanskrit inscriptions are learned references to literary and technical aspects. The kingdom of Champa in modern Vietnam has yielded number of Sanskrit or bilingual Sanskrit and Champa inscriptions dating from approximately 3rd century to 4th century. The Wokana inscription is considered to be the earliest Sanskrit inscriptions of Southeast Asia, although its precise dating is a matter of controversy. There are few more inscriptions in Indian languages from Laos, mostly Sanskrit inscriptions Khmer Empire, are from beginning of 7th century to 12th century AD. As you understand, Malaysia has a few Sanskrit records which are Buddhist in content dating from 4th to 8th century AD. Mostly they are found in northern corner of the country. In Indonesia, the Sanskrit inscriptions are found in good number on stone, slabs, pillars, images and other material, especially on the island of Java, but also on Sumatra, Borneo and Bali. There are many Sanskrit inscriptions in Java in the middle period around 8th and 9th centuries. Sanskrit inscriptions on Sumatra range in date from 7th, 8th to 14th century AD. As in Java, most of the later inscriptions are Buddhist in nature. A few inscriptions, mostly dating to 9th to 10th century, have been found in Bali. Thus, we can say Sanskrit was an epigraphical language and very popular medium of expression not only within India but also beyond the seas, especially in Southeast Asian countries. And we may note here, these records were examined much earlier by greater scholars, but there is a greater need now to review, recopy and go to the sites and examine. Many archaeological expeditions are being commissioned, but epigraphist team also should visit most of the Southeast Asian countries wherever Sanskrit inscriptions and inscriptions in other languages are also located. They have to rebuild again to see and understand the deeper implications and connect it with other archaeological evidence that is need of the hour. So a greater review, greater understanding, and one has to again take an epigraphical tour to Southeast Asian countries to admire, appreciate the rich epigraphical material which has once very popular in India, has traveled all along with other tradition and culture to Southeast Asia. This is really a great thing. And some of the Sanskrit inscriptions are shown here, very few, which are earliest Sanskrit inscription, Mathura inscription of Sodasa. This is a very unique record. When we spoke about the Brahmi, it's a paradigm shift in evolution. This is also important. This record also is important from its Sanskrit content. It's a good Sanskrit inscription. Again, a few Gupta inscriptions. Udaygiri cave inscription of Chandragupta belong to regnal year 82, and Allahabad pillar inscription of Samudragupta. This is which we have just now discussed. It's a beautiful classical piece. Apart from political history, it is a very important record as far as its literary contents are concerned. And Karamadanda stone inscription, this is how to show most of the Gupta inscriptions are written in beautiful Sanskrit, and this is one such example. There are many, however, as an example, a couple of inscriptions are only shown here, but there are many Gupta inscriptions which are deciphered and published. And finally, the Aihole inscription of Pulakeshin II, this is also beautifully written in good metrical Sanskrit. So further, to advance the knowledge, I recommend the students to go through the e-text given, and as I told in the beginning, there is a greater need to study Sanskrit. Unfortunately, the Sanskrit studies has been given a background. But to really appreciate, to understand our deeper implications of the inscription, especially Sanskrit inscriptions, much attention has to be done to understand and learn Sanskrit. This is a very, very important, and the references that are given that also may be read so that a comprehensive, a full-fledged idea can be formed of the Sanskrit inscriptions dealt in this module. Thank you.